A fortune so vast it could topple empires. A web of secrets so dark it could choke the light from the sky. And a single letter that burned my world to ash, all thrust into my hands the day my grandmother, Isolde, gasped her final ragged breath. I was 23, a nobody teetering on the edge of oblivion, when her trembling script clawed its way into my soul. Sometimes, people bear their truest, most monstrous selves only when they think you're nothing but filth beneath their heels. The earth shuddered beneath me as if it knew what I held, a stack of documents unveiling my inheritance. $50 million in labyrinthine investments, real estate kingdoms sprawling across 3 continents, and stakes in corporations so powerful they could crush economies with a whisper. Isolde had forged this empire from dust and shadow, her name a ghost's echo the world barely heard. My parents, though, saw only a withered miser, a stingy crone who spat on their golden dreams. They never suspected she was Chicago's richest phantom, a secret she wielded like a blade, her silent, smoldering revenge. If you love stories of resilience, reclaiming justice with style, and rediscovering your worth, hit that subscribe button for Graceful Revenge now. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a video. Let's dive into the power of elegant revenge and life's deepest lessons together. Zephyr! Callista's voice slashed through the fog of my thoughts like a whip cracking against bare flesh as I sat at our dining room table, Isolde's letter still searing my trembling fingertips. Did that miserable old bat leave us anything worth a damn, or just more of her moldy, useless books? I lifted my gaze to Callista, my mother, a woman who'd spent 2 decades clawing at my very essence, desperate to chisel me into her fragile porcelain ideal, only to shatter into 1,000 jagged pieces each time I defied her will. She loomed in the kitchen doorway, a vision of cold elegance in her tailored silk blouse and skirt. Rage and contempt twisted her flawless features into something almost feral. "Just books," I lied, my voice sliding out smooth as oil, deftly slipping the letter into my sleeve where it couldn't betray me. "And some yellowed photographs no one would care to frame." She flung her head back with a wail that could have splintered glass, a sound so theatrical it bordered on absurdity. "Of course, that witch never fathomed what it takes to dazzle in this cruel, glittering world. Do you have any idea what the Hendersons would hiss behind their manicured hands if they glimpsed our pitiful, decade-old wreck of a car?" I knew all too well. For 20 long, suffocating years, I'd endured her endless tirades about the Hendersons, the Blackwells, and every other gilded dynasty she groveled before in a desperate bid to win their favor. Their esteem was her lifeblood, her altar of worship. "They're likely too tangled in their own petty scandals to even notice our car, Mom," I said, my tone dry as a desert wind sweeping across forgotten bones. "That's exactly the kind of reckless, naive drivel that keeps me awake at night," she snarled, her eyes blazing like twin infernos, ready to consume me whole. "You're her echo, no grasp of how this world devours the clueless and spits out their remains. Thank God Rune has the guts to rise above it all." Rune, my younger brother, her anointed king, her golden child. At 20, he'd never once sullied his pampered hands with honest labor. Why would he bother? Callista and Gideon, my father, funneled their ever-shrinking wealth into his every reckless caprice. Collapsed startups that bled money like open wounds, a trove of ostentatious watches that glittered with hollow pride. A life of splendor they could no longer sustain on their crumbling foundation. Her features softened then, a rare glint of triumph igniting her gaze like a spark in a storm. Speaking of Rune, he's been accepted into Harvard Business School, a feat you'd never understand. Your father and I are throwing a lavish gala tonight. Every name that matters in this city will bask in our glow. Wear something that doesn't disgrace us for once." Her eyes scraped over my plain dress, an unadorned throat, with a sneer sharp enough to draw blood. A silent accusation of my failure to reflect her grandeur. I nodded, choking down the bitter gall that rose in my throat. The memory of my own triumph, graduating summa cum laude from Northwestern's business school last year, met with nothing but their absence. No celebration, no pride. Just their fawning over Rune's laughable putts at some backwater golf match. I could still hear their excuses ringing in my ears from that day. Rune preening in a new leather jacket they'd gifted him for no reason at all, while I'd sat alone in my dorm, tallying up student loans they'd refused to ease, claiming, "Rune needs the support more. He's destined for greatness, Zephyr, not you." That night, I fled to my cramped apartment above the bookstore where I masqueraded as a pauper, poring over Isolde's cryptic files with a hunger that bordered on obsession. The job was a carefully crafted ruse. I owned the building, plus 3 others on the block, all cloaked beneath the veil of Isolde's shadowy holding companies, a secret empire I'd nursed in silence. To my family, I was a threadbare clerk clawing at survival, barely worth a glance. The truth was a dagger I clutched tight against my chest, its edge gleaming with promise. My phone jolted me from my reverie with Gideon's text, his words dripping with command. "Don't you dare be late tonight. The Blackwells are dragging Theron along. Wear the blue dress Callista chose. It's your last chance to matter in this family." Theron Blackwell, their shining knight in a matchmaking plot to chain me to their hollow, crumbling society. If they knew I could buy the Blackwells' tottering empire 3 times over and grind it into dust beneath my heel, they'd choke on their own hubris until their faces turned blue. I arrived at their mansion punctually, draped in a stark black dress, a silent, defiant rebellion against the garish blue monstrosity Callista had foisted on me, a garment so hideous it screamed desperation. The valet, a stranger roped into their pompous charade to impress their shallow guests, cast me a pitying glance as I tossed him the keys to my battered Honda Civic, a car I'd kept as a prop in this long, bitter play. Inside, the house was a fever dream of extravagance run wild. Chandeliers wept rivers of light onto crystal flutes that clinked with hollow cheer. Flowers shrieked wealth from every nook and cranny, and the air stank of overpriced perfume mingled with the sour tang of despair. "Zephyr!" Callista's voice pierced the foyer's buzzing chaos, a venomous arrow aimed straight for my heart. "I told you to wear the blue dress, you insolent girl." "This one wasn't filthy," I replied, my voice cool as frost settling over a grave. She squeezed her eyes shut, a saint summoning patience for a wayward sinner she'd long given up on saving. "For once in your useless, wretched life, make an effort. Theron's our bridge to the top, and you won't ruin this for us." I swallowed a bitter, scalding laugh that threatened to erupt. I'd pored over the dossiers late into sleepless nights. Blackwell Industries was a crumbling facade, its so-called success a mirage woven from debt and delusion, teetering on the edge of collapse. Rune swept in then, a prince in a tuxedo so exquisitely tailored, it must have cost more than my supposed yearly pittance, a garment bought with money they no longer had. "There's my champion!" Gideon bellowed, slamming a meaty hand on his shoulder with a force that echoed through the room. "Harvard's next colossus, the pride of this family." The crowd swarmed him like flies to a carcass, crooning over his supposed brilliance. No one dared whisper of the 3 ventures he'd incinerated in spectacular flames, each a pyre built from my parents' fraying coffers, each failure excused as a stepping stone to glory. Theron slunk over to me, champagne sloshing in his glass, his grin a honed edge glinting with predatory intent. Zephyr, still toiling away at that sad little bookstore, scraping by? Bills don't vanish on their own, I said lightly, my tone a mask over the storm brewing within. He laughed, a jackal's glee ringing in my ears. My family's empire could toss you a bone to gnaw on. Just beg for it, and I'll see what I can do. I'll think it over, I replied, my smile a steel trap snapping shut, hiding the contempt that simmered beneath. The night unfurled like a twisted masquerade. Riches paraded before hollow eyes, vanities caressed with trembling hands. I watched Callista and Gideon circle Rune like vultures guarding a prized kill, weaving fables of his inevitable triumph while plastering over the wreckage of his past with frantic, desperate lies. But the fissures bled through, impossible to ignore. Gideon's quaking hand as he scrawled his signature on the caterer's exorbitant bill, his knuckles white with strain. Callista's wince, sharp and involuntary, when a guest boasted of their latest lavish jaunt, a trip my parents had mirrored, not for leisure, but to grovel on bended knee for a lifeline to save a deal spiraling into the abyss. They were sinking, drowning in their own excess. They'd sooner slit their throats with their own manicured nails than admit the truth to anyone, least of all themselves. Their mansion, their crown jewel, their symbol of supremacy, had been remortgaged 3 times over to prop up Rune's endless fantasies, each refinancing a deeper cut into their dwindling reserves. What they couldn't see, what they'd never suspect, was me, a specter lurking in the dark, snatching up their debts through a labyrinth of shell companies, every loan, every lien, every scrap of their pride now mine to wield like a guillotine poised above their necks. Driving home in my Honda, the engine's hum a quiet hymn to my patience. Isolde's prophecy rang in my ears like a tolling bell. They show their truth when you're nothing. The storm was brewing, and I would be its harbinger. Their ruin thundered closer, with a vengeance soon after. The staff dwindled to mere wraiths, their once bustling home now eerily silent. The country club locked them out with cold indifference, and Callista's newfound passion for vintage tatters couldn't mask the decay festering beneath their polished veneer. Yet Rune strutted on, untouched by the chaos swallowing them whole. When I saw him roar past my bookstore in a gleaming Porsche, its engine a taunting snarl, I knew they'd plunged into the void. Their last reserves bled dry. I sat in my true bastion, not the bookstore's grimy nook where I played the downtrodden fool, but the 47th floor of Chicago's mightiest spire, CEO of Isolde Investments, surveying a city my grandmother had sculpted from raw ambition and steel. "Miss Zephyr!" Lyra's voice crackled through the intercom, sharp and urgent. "Rune siphoned another chunk from their emergency fund, $175,000, straight to a car dealer." My screen blazed with the damning evidence, blood money they didn't possess, a final act of defiance against their crumbling empire. "What's left?" I demanded, though the answer was etched into my mind already. "Barely $50,000. The mortgage payment looms next week, and there's nothing to meet it." I sank into my chair, my year-long gambit coiling tighter around them like a serpent ready to strike. I held their mortgage, their credit cards, their every frantic plea for mercy. All of it, every last thread of their existence, now dangled from my fingers. "Send the foreclosure notices," I ordered Lyra, my voice forged in unyielding iron. "It's time they face the abyss." But the seeds of this moment had sprouted months earlier, a memory that fueled the fire in my gut. Rune cornering me at the bookstore one rainy afternoon, his smirk dripping with entitlement as he demanded $10,000 for a surefire venture that'll change everything. I'd refused, my voice steady as I told him, "I don't have it to give." And he'd sneered, spitting, "You're a petty leech, Zephyr. Always were," before storming off. That insult had been the spark. Now, it was a blaze driving me to see this through. Dawn broke over the city, and I lingered at the bookstore, poised like a predator awaiting its prey. Callista burst through the door, her last season handbag swinging like a tattered war banner, her composure shattered. "Zephyr!" she screeched, her eyes wild with panic, her voice a jagged edge of desperation. "The bank! They're stealing our home, tearing it from us." I feigned dismay, glancing up from a sham ledger I'd propped open for show. How could this happen? "Gideon's deal's imploded. It's a hiccup, nothing more. We need you to save us." She lunged across the counter, her nails gouging into my hand as if she could draw blood and money alike. "What have you hoarded, you little miser? Tell me!" I nearly cackled, the sound bubbling up like acid. After years of spitting on my wretched, pitiful job, she was a carrion bird circling my bones, ravenous for scraps. "Mom, I scraped by on $35,000. There's nothing left after rent and bills." Her face collapsed, a mask of despair crumpling into itself. "You've got something. A rainy day crumb hidden away, I know it." $3,000, I lied, my voice a blade honed to cut. "That's all I've got in this world." "Hand it over," she snapped, her tone a whip cracking through the air. "Just until Gideon rises from this. Rune's teetering on the edge of glory, and we can't falter now." "Sell his Porsche then," I fired back, my words a dart aimed at her pride. "Ludicrous," she roared, her face twisting into a snarl. "He needs it to mesmerize investors, to keep us afloat. You're too dim to see the stakes." "So I should starve to save him?" I countered, my voice rising with a fury I'd held back too long. "You're not him, you're—" She floundered, waving a dismissive hand as if I were a speck of dust on her pristine world. "Not in those circles," I mused bitterly, envisioning the gala I'd soon command as Isolde's heir, Chicago's titans bowing at my feet while she groveled in ignorance. "I can't, Mom. I need shelter to survive." She reared up, poison spilling from her lips in a torrent. "Ungrateful wretch. After all we've bled for you, you dare turn your back?" "Bled what exactly?" I pressed, my voice a quiet storm. Her silence was a chasm, a gaping void where love should have stood, where it had never existed. "Get out!" I hissed, my tone glacial, unyielding. "What did you say?" "Get out of my store. Don't you dare crawl back begging for my scraps." She stormed off, the door slamming shut with a crash that rattled the shelves, her curses echoing like a dying beast's roar. I grinned, a predator's satisfaction settling over me. Checkmate was within reach. That night, Gideon's call came, his voice a honed rapier slicing through the stillness. "Zephyr, we'll hash this out like grown-ups. Callista says you spat on us, kicked us when we're down." "I've no savings to give, Dad," I said, my tone steady despite the tempest raging within. "Our name, our honor, hangs by a thread," he thundered, his words shaking with a fury born of desperation. "Foreclosure. Do you fathom what that does to Rune's star, to everything we've built?" I pictured the foreclosure notices piling high in my lawyer's lair, each one a brick in the wall of their ruin. "Rune's got a Porsche sitting pretty. Let him sell it and pitch in." "That's his ladder to greatness," he bellowed, his voice a roar that could have shaken the heavens. "And what about my ladder?" My future! He sighed, a monarch grieving a serf too lowly to mourn. Zephyr, you're a bookstore drone, a nobody. Runes the phoenix rising. Face it and stop this nonsense. Sorry, Dad, I can't help you. Then you're no kin of mine, no daughter I'll claim. The line died with a click that echoed like a gunshot. I smirked into the city's pulsing glow. They'd grovel soon, and I'd savor every second. The bankruptcy hearing loomed over us all, a frigid October dawn breaking at 9 a.m. I watched from my car as they rolled up in Rune's Porsche, their final, pathetic strut of pride on a stage already collapsing beneath them. Callista's designer rags screamed obsolescence, threads fraying at the edges. Gideon's suit sagged, exhausted and worn thin. Rune's smirk wavered, a brittle shell cracking under the weight of reality. They didn't spot me, saw only their shamed, penniless drudge, the daughter they discarded. I slipped into the courthouse behind them, my briefcase laden with their doom. Ownership deeds, debt logs, their annihilation etched in cold, unforgiving ink. The room thrummed with Chicago's scavengers, socialites, reporters, rivals, salivating for my family's fall, their whispers a chorus of anticipation. Callista and Gideon sat stiff as statues, their chins held high in defiance of their shame, while Rune slumped beside them, texting denial into the void, his fingers trembling. "All rise!" the bailiff boomed, his voice a thunderclap as Judge Sigrid swept in. Unyielding, a reaper of the self-damned, her presence a storm cloud over the proceedings. Case 2847, family bankruptcy, she declared, her eyes carving through the files with surgical precision. Creditor present? I stood, my Chanel suit ablaze with quiet power, not the ragtag Zephyr they'd mocked for years. Yes, Your Honor. Zephyr, representing Isolde Investments. The air shattered like glass. Callista whirled, her face splintering into a mask of shock and betrayal. Gideon paled, his breath catching as if struck. Rune's phone smashed to the floor with a clatter that rang through the stunned silence. Zephyr, Callista whimpered, her voice a specter's cry, frail and broken. I marched forward, my briefcase thudding onto the creditor's table with a sound that reverberated like fate sealing shut. Good morning, Callista, Gideon, Rune, I said, my tone laced with a cold, triumphant edge. What sorcery is this? What treachery? Gideon roared, lurching to his feet, his face a thunderhead of rage. His lawyer dragged him down, hissing warnings in his ear. Sigrid's gavel slammed down, a crack that silenced the room. Order! Zephyr, proceed! Isolde Investments owns their debts, their mortgage, their loans, their credit cards. The total stands at $12.7 million, every cent of their ruin in my hands, I said, my voice steady, unyielding. Fraud! Lies! Rune howled, leaping up, his face twisted with disbelief and fury. She's a speck, a nobody, I sneered, my gaze locking onto his with a fire that could have burned him to ash. I own the bookstore, the block, and far beyond. I'm the CEO of Isolde Investments, once known as Isolde Enterprises, my grandmother's legacy. Murmurs erupted like a wildfire through the gallery. Isolde's myth pulsed in hushed lore, a name whispered in awe and fear. Silence! Sigrid snapped, her gavel a second thunderclap. Continue, Zephyr. 3 years ago, I claimed $50 million from Isolde's estate. I watched them gut their home, bleed it dry for Rune's disasters. 3 failed ventures, each a monument to their folly, while I snared their debts in shadow. Piece by piece, until I held their lives in my grasp. Callista wept openly now, mascara carving black rivers down her cheeks, her sobs a pitiful symphony. Gideon sat petrified, a statue of dread, realization dawning like a noose tightening around his neck. "Yet," I forged on, yanking a sheaf of papers from my briefcase with a flourish, "I offer a lifeline, a pact born of mercy they don't deserve. Runes cut off, no more playthings to squander. They'll face counseling, a chokehold budget to leash their excess. The mansion's gone. I've bought them a modest cage to rot in if they choose." "You can't do this!" Rune surged forward, his fist raised as if to strike me down, his eyes blazing with a rage that mirrored his downfall. Sigrid barked, "Sit, or you'll rot in contempt, boy!" And he stumbled back, seething. "This is treason, blasphemy!" Gideon roared, his voice cracking with the weight of his crumbling empire. "You're our flesh, our blood! How dare you!" I spun to face them, fury a wildfire roaring through my veins, my words a torrent of pent-up wrath. "Am I your flesh? 20 years you trampled me underfoot, scorned my grind, crowned Rune your god, left me to claw through the dirt alone. You demanded my last dime without a flinch, as if I were nothing but a beggar at your feast." "We gave you everything we could," Callista sobbed, her voice a wail that grated against the air, her hands clutching at her chest as if to hold her lies together. "No, you gorged Rune until he choked on your indulgence." I rose with Isolde's shade whispering in my ear. "She taught me your hearts when I was nothing. Greedy, rotten, grasping cores that deserve no pity." The gallery gasped audibly. A socialite in the back whispered, "She's Isolde's heir. The legend lives," her voice trembling with awe, while a reporter scribbled furiously, his pen racing to capture the spectacle. Gideon's lawyer leaned in, his face pale, muttering, "Take it! It's this or nothing!" But Callista shook her head, her voice rising in a desperate plea. "Please, Zephyr, don't do this. We'll change. We'll make it right." I laughed, a sound sharp and hollow. "Too late for your crocodile tears, Callista. You've shown me who you are, and I'll never unsee it." Sigrid eyed my terms, her gaze piercing. "Fair, too generous by half. Accept this, or crumble into dust. What's your answer?" Their lawyer pleaded in hushed, frantic tones. They had no road left to tread. "We accept," Gideon rasped, his voice a broken shard, a fallen titan bowing to his fate. "Fine," I said, hurling a set of keys onto the table with a clatter that echoed like a judge's final decree. "Your new den, Lincoln Park, 3 beds, nothing more. Movers hit tomorrow to strip your palace bare. Rune, your Porsche is dust. A Toyota's your fate now, and you'll learn to live with it." They signed in a fog of defeat, their eyes averted, fury and shame boiling beneath their silence. Rune charged out, clawing at accounts I'd already frozen, his footsteps a fading drumbeat of rage. The courtroom buzzed as the crowd dispersed, whispers of betrayal and fortune swirling like vultures over a corpse. I stood tall, my victory a cold flame burning in my chest. Outside, Callista staggered after me, her heels clicking a frantic rhythm on the stone, her voice a threadbare whisper. "Why, Zephyr? Why let us plummet so low before this cruel unveiling?" I wheeled on her, ice coursing through my veins, my words a blade aimed at her heart. "You had to taste it, Callista. The muck you buried me in, the scorn you heaped on me while you lifted Rune to the heavens. Money's not worth, nor is your vaunted rank. Choke on that lesson until it sinks into your bones." "Forgiveness?" she croaked, tears pooling in her eyes, her hands trembling as she reached for me. "Crawl first," I spat, my voice a whip cracking through the air. "Your new life's tolerable, not lush, not grand. Thrive or rot in it. I'm through nursing your delusions." I strode to my Mercedes, shedding the Honda's skin like a snake sloughing off a worn husk. Oh, and Callista, that blue dress you adored? I own its maker now. It's scrapped, gaudy filth unfit for even a rag heap. Her stunned mask crumpled, her mouth agape, and that sight was my crown, the bitter harvest of 3 years' silent war. 3 months later, I ruled from my office atop the city, reports sprawled across my desk like a conqueror's map. Callista and Gideon clung to their leash, humbled in the glare of mandatory counseling, their pride ground to dust. Rune slaved at a grunt job, sweat staining his silk soul, his hands finally dirtied by the world he'd once scorned. But a month prior, he'd stormed my tower, his eyes blazing with a madness born of ruin, hurling a chair at my glass wall with a scream that shook the room. "You stole my life, you viper! I'll make you pay!" The chair shattered the pane into 1,000 glittering shards, a cascade of chaos raining down as security dragged him out, his curses fading into the wind. I'd smiled, unshaken, my power a fortress he'd never breach. On my desk, a photo of Isolde and me glowed, her bookstore, my fortress, a testament to her legacy. Her words sang through me like a hymn. They show their truth when you're nothing. She'd gifted me more than wealth. She'd armed me with the ultimate power, the instant you rip off the veil, a guillotine slicing through their lies, leaving them bare and broken before you.